Hello and welcome to Let's Enter the Arena. I'm your host, VM Campos, and this is the podcast where I talk with a member of the Magic the Gathering community, and we focus on Magic Arena. Well, everyone, we've been stuck at home for quite a while. Hopefully you've been playing a lot of Magic in any form, whether it is Standard, Modern, Pioneer, Pauper, Commander, etc., or some good old Magic Arena. So, I've got a return guest to the podcast where we'll talk about various aspects of Magic in the past, present, and future. Please welcome back Alan.
How's it going, everyone?
Glad to have you back. It's been a little while. Last time you were on the podcast, you were about to get some promotion on Magic. You were a featured streamer, I believe.
Yeah, that was a few months ago. Yeah, it's been a little while, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, thanks. All right, well, thanks for being on the show again. Would you like to self-promote a little bit? Any streams or YouTube or anything you'd like to share, Twitter and such?
Yeah, right now, the stream is twitch.tv/Dragosi MtG. Twitter is at Esports Alan, Esports ALAN. And recently, kind of a cool thing, just to kind of also promote, I recently got picked up by an organization called Rebel Esports, and so now I'm on their Magic the Gathering team with a couple of other folks from the Arena community. Shinogi is their first Magic player, and then I'm also with Praetor MtG and Schnan. Those two guys are from Germany. They're all super cool dudes, and so yeah, we're now an official team. So that's kind of a cool thing to check out as well.
Oh, that is really cool. Congrats on that. How long ago did it happen?
Actually, last week. Interestingly enough, last week we kind of sat down and we talked about kind of what it would look like to be a team and what kind of what we each envisioned for a team. And it kind of, all the stars aligned and the thoughts, and visions aligned with that. And so the Rebel, as an organization, they're traditionally in the FPS genre. They have like a Gears of War team and whatnot and stuff too. So like they're just jumping into this world of Magic esports, and so right now we're kind of feeling our way through it and figuring out, okay, what kinds of things are we as players going to be expected of by the organization, and then vice versa, what kind of things that would we want to have that would make our experience in the organization better and whatnot. So we're just kind of working our way through that, but we officially were announced on Sunday. So our first event as a team was the Arena Open on Saturday.
Oh, that's cool. We'll get into the details of that, but it sounds pretty cool that you're part of a team and all of that. So I guess you've all had chats and developed like the best strategies to crush all your opponents by now.
Yeah, I mean we're kind of right now looking at it because interestingly enough, the Red Bull Untapped Germany event is coming up.
Yeah,
and both our German counterparts, Praetor and Schnan, they both have also qualified for the Mythic Invitational qualifier at the end of the month through hitting Mythic. So we were talking today kind of about like what is new standard going to look like come Thursday when the new bans and the companion change come into effect, and we were just kind of theorizing what's going to look good, and so we have a few ideas floating around that we might be comfortable with, and so we're expecting to do pretty well coming into the next set of arena seasons here.
Yeah, I heard people chattering online saying, well, it's going to feel like a brand new standard again with some of these changes. Do you kind of see it that way, that it's that big of an open field, even though it's two pieces, which are obviously big pieces of standard, but do you think it's like a whole new playing field with the new changes coming up this Thursday? Well, actually, it happened last week because this. It happened yesterday. This peeking behind the curtain today. The podcast is releasing on Friday. It happened yesterday. Time, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, time's a myth. I fully expect that. Interestingly enough, we're going backwards, not necessarily hoping to at least for the first couple of weeks. We're not going to be exploring brand new decks right away. We're actually going to be going back to decks of old that were tried and true, and that because the companion change is so massive, that things like Team of Reclamation and Bant Ramp and whatnot, and the Azor or the Rakdos or Jund sacrifice face decks, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those that weren't necessarily impacted too heavily by the companion change are going to be the decks that kind of rise to the top and stay there for a little while until somebody figures out, okay, what is the next iteration of, I don't know, what's the next best broken deck to play? Is it still going to be the Jund deck or the Jund sacrifice deck? Is it Teamer Adventures? Is it Blue-White Control? Kind of what does that next, tier of decks look like? But I expect that we're going to see probably 4 or 5 of the old decks from standards past rise to the top and kind of stick around for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting, like dusting off the old classics and see if they're still hits.
Yeah, I mean, they're still even now they're still relevant, right? It's not like the Jund Sacrifice deck is definitely in the tier one position as far as the meta is concerned, and then like Blue-White Control is also is up there as well. Bant Ramp and Team of Reclamation, Team of Adventures, all these float within the tier 1, tier 1.5, maybe tier 2 strategies, and I expect that once the big hitters of Luca and Winota and Agent of Treachery and Fires go away, we will start to see those kind of creep back up into the top again. And just because Sacrifice is such a consistent, so I think Sacrifice really is such a consistent strategy that it's going to be kind of one of the ones to beat.
Yeah, I think, thinking about it, reasoning it out that way, I think that's exactly true in terms of maybe people sometimes think I've got to master this tier 1 deck, but yeah, there's still tier 1.5, tier 2 that can still kind of work because I made it up to Diamond 3 this past season using the Team of Reclamation, the one that was kind of important back on the last Mythic Championship, which now you don't hear about it as much, but I used that one to get back from whatever it was, like silver up to diamond. It's still there. It's just that people think, this is the one that everyone's on their lips. Yeah, we'll try something else that's not quite on everyone's lips, and that's still going to give you some good results. Yeah,
the Reclamation deck is one where it's I call it's like the players deck, like the people who have really spent the time to really learn and grind out like the matches with the deck, right? Like they're the ones who are having the most success with it. For people like myself, I don't have that experience with the Reclamation. I just have never picked the deck up really. Like I could never play that deck because it is very complicated. There are a lot of play patterns and whatnot to go with it. And so like those there's a very, anybody can do well with those decks. You just have to put the time in, you have to know the play patterns. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that is, we've seen a lot of people also other like professionals and whatnot also have great success with the deck too.
Yeah, when I was first putting it together, well, we all got a chance to play with everyone's decks. Remember there was that event before the Mythic Championship, we got to play with everyone's decks, and I was kind of bouncing around between different ones, and I ended up going with the Autumn Burchett version of it, and I thought, well, this is complicated. It's 3 colors, it's got a lot of interaction, but I kept coming back at it during that event, and then after the event was over, I was trying to put it together with my own wildcards, and it took a little while to get all the wildcards for it, because I just do the grinding. I don't usually put money into the game, but I do it through grinding and completing the dailies and all of that, and I was putting it together slowly over time, and I was getting better at it, and again that got me to that point. And so I totally agree with you on that about like it's not as far as like, well, any deck's gonna get you where you need to go, not that far, but it's gonna be any deck that you master or any deck that you understand pretty well and better than your opponents. I think that can get you pretty far.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really kind of having a good understanding of what you're doing, right? Like Magic is not a game where you can very quickly hop around from deck to deck and expect to do well. I mean, there are probably some people who can do that, but generally, you need to spend time and have get good repetitions with these decks to really understand them, because not everything is mono red, and even mono red even has some interesting play patterns when they're played at even higher levels than your average player, right? So definitely, it's you got to put the time in.
Exactly. Speaking of time, we all seem to, or many of us seem to have a lot of time on our hands because we've got a lot of stay-at-home orders in many parts of the country and the world. And if we can take a little moment, like, do you have any positive thoughts or advice or anything about like what we're all going through at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I encourage everybody who is feeling down, who's feeling a little bit lonely or what have you, because we're all cooped up at home.
Mhm.
One thing that a group of my friends and I did is that we all got together and we joined a Discord server, and we play tabletop simulator or party games on Steam,
Mhm.
on the weekends or Friday night. And it's a good way to associate, just to keep, see friends, see their faces, and interact with them, because we can't do that in person. And so, like, that's a great thing to do. Also, like, so that's my non-magic group of friends, and then my magic group of friends, we all play. We play brawl together. We do laddering and deck building and stuff together on Arena. And we play other games as well too. So I encourage anybody who is kind of having those issues, or who is experiencing some like loneliness or distress during these crazy times, find a way to interact with your friends, especially like online is a great way to do it, whether it's over Xbox Live or PlayStation Now or what have you, right? Find that way to interact with people digitally, and it will make a world of difference. And then for the people who are also feeling like the cabin fever,
Mhm.
I've found recently that going on runs is actually not a bad idea. It actually is kind of nice, and it's nice to get out, exercise a little bit, keep yourself, going, and keep your body moving, and getting out to at least see this, feel the sunshine and then the fresh air and whatnot
Mhm.
is also it's always a great thing.
I completely agree on both. We have the ability nowadays with technology to reach out to friends and family that was pretty hard to do even just a few years ago, or especially when we were a little younger. And now we have the ability to get on a Discord server, do Xbox live chat, we can do WhatsApp, we can do Zoom, we can do all that stuff and then see each other. And it's not as good as being in person, of course, but still reaching out with those human connections. I think that definitely is a way to stave off some of the bad feelings that may come up during this time. I had a birthday party for my friend Vicky a few weeks ago, and we all, on our side of the camera, we all got ourselves a little birthday cake in her honor, like a little cupcake with a candle sort of thing. And we all sung her happy birthday that way, and then hung out on camera for a little while. And it's still doable. We can still be together even though we're apart.
Yeah, that's actually pretty awesome. The other thing also too that I found interestingly for me is picking up a new hobby.
Mhm.
So I've started kind of getting down into the world of custom mechanical keyboards.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it's a very niche like little hobby, but there's so much like depth, and there's some like streamers on Twitch who
Hmm.
are keyboard builders, and they make keyboards for other like bigger streamers and stuff like that. So there's a guy who I follow, Teha Types. He made a keyboard for Tifu, who's like this. I guess he's a big like Fortnite streamer,
Hmm.
and for Skara, and for the guys for Offline TV. And so like he builds these keyboards. That's his job, and that's what he does for Twitch is build keyboards. And so I've been down this rabbit hole of just wanting to build my own custom mechanical keyboard, but it's not cheap. It's expensive, but there are some things you can do to kind of like jump into that hobby at a budget, price point, and kind of get the some of the experience of doing it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's finding like a cool hobby or something new um, that you weren't doing before could also be a great use of time.
Well, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I think getting people's opinions on these topics is very important because what someone thinks about or what someone's idea is might not be what someone else's. So if we share it all, I think we'll all get to some interesting concepts. Well, on the main topic of the podcast about magic with a focus on Magic Arena, let's catch up a little bit since you've been on the podcast back in 2019. Just a kind of a quick overview about how was your life in Magic in the year 2019?
I think it was pretty good actually. Got a lot of time to aside from doing the streams and whatnot, and so like finding out that I was going to be featured. So I was featured in January, right? So it was right in the middle of January is when I got my feature stream. But throughout of 2019, doing all of the streamer preview events and whatnot, and just having being able to actually like play Commander with my friends, and actually it it was all really good. I got to even go to Commander Fest in Chicago, which was awesome. That was a really cool experience. I mean, I miss going to big events. I used to go to things to like Star City Games events and Grand Prix. So going to Command Fest was really cool, and getting to do that. So yeah, a lot of cool things happened in 2019. I definitely enjoyed it a lot.
Did you go to any pre-releases for sets in 2019?
I think I was War of the Spark in 2019?
Yeah, that was I believe in January or
May.
April, one of the first. Yeah, actually, Ravnica Allegiance was first in 2019, and then in April was War. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I did Ravnica Allegiance and I did War of the Spark, both pre-releases. Those were fun.
Oh, cool. I only got a chance to go out to the War of the Spark one, and that was pretty fun, having played the cards digitally and with those planeswalkers digitally, and then having to do it manually in real life. That's always kind of cool to see those kind of two versions of Magic. And so I only got a chance to go to one in 2019, and then one in 2020. But it was going to be my resolution for 2020 to go to each one this year. But okay, I've been one out of two so far. But I think everyone else can say the same thing there. So cool. So 2019 was pretty good for you in Magic. Then what's a set that you liked in 2019? We don't have to limit it to just the stuff in Standard on Arena, but anything that came out in 2019, which was, by my count, about 7,002 products or so.
Yeah, there was a lot. I think, honestly, okay, I'll say this. For as far as a Standard set, I personally, so I always will have a love of the Ravnica stuff. So Ravnica Allegiance and War of the Spark coming out, those were great. But Throne, I think Throne of Eldraine hit a very special kind of mark and a special kind of point for me in that, like, the flavor of that set was super good, and it was really, really enjoyable to see. Kind of these, like, fairy tale-esque things, being brought into this different light. And so that was one that I really loved. And then from the supplemental product side of things, as well, I think, what was UMA, was that 2019? I think UMA was 2019, Ultimate Masters.
I think it was 2018, because people have been talking about how the new Double Masters is about to be almost 2 years since its last Masters set.
Was it Modern Horizons?
Modern Horizons, yeah, that was 2019.
Yeah, that was also a really great set too. Like, that was also really, really, really well done. I thought that they brought a lot of really fun cards, a lot of things that I like to do in Commander. They brought to the table. So I thought that was also a really cool set. But I think honestly, Throne of Eldraine might have been the set that I think I loved the most out of all of it.
I would agree, and it's a little bit of a shame that they've gone to the staying on one plane for one set model, I guess. So it would have been cool to see a little bit more of Eldraine, but throughout the whole history of Magic, it used to be 3 sets, and then people were fatigued by the third. Then they went to 2 sets for a few years, and now they're going to 1 set. So we'll see how it goes. It's always changing. But yes, I liked Eldraine a lot as well, and I think one of the reasons that I liked it was I was at San Diego Comic-Con at Mark Rosewater's panel where he announced it in a crowd of people, and that was the very first time that I had ever been to any of his talks at Comic-Con. I've been going to Comic-Con for years, but I wasn't into Magic for a long time until I got back into it in 2017, but I didn't even know that he did any panels in 2017 and 2018. I don't know. I just wasn't on my radar, so I didn't go to it either. But 2019, I thought, okay, I'm back into Magic. I'm sticking around with it. I'm going to go to his panel. I'm going to wait in line, one of those famous San Diego Comic-Con lines. I'm going to wait outside there and get in. And I did, and I got a terrible seat, of course, but I was in there. And he announced it, and the crowd was eating it all up, and it was pretty amazing. And then to actually then see and play the cards, I think that influenced why I liked the set, but I liked it for the mechanics and the story and the art. Not so much Oko, but everything else was really good all about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the thing for me that I loved the most about it was Fires of Invention is my favorite card out of the set by like bar none. It's my favorite archetype in standard is always going to be like Jeskai Super Friends or Jeskai Control. And so with Fires of Invention giving us a way to effectively it changed up the way we thought about how some of these decks were played, and really gave us a very powerful tool for some of these control decks. That was really what like solidified it.
Well, that's definitely a fascinating card in terms of it gives you, it sort of like lets you ramp plus cheat mana, sort of, but then it limits you to 2 spells that the rest of the turn, and people might think, well, that's a limitation, only 2 spells, and you're limited to only on your turn, and all these limitations, but it's so good that as of the podcast today, it just got banned. It's not available anymore.
Yeah, it's like it's 2 spells, but if those 2 spells are hated, it's
that's all you need.
That's all you need, yeah.
That doesn't then detract from you actually using your mana. It's just you can't cast more spells, but you've got a lot of great activated abilities that you can still tap into.
Right, which was kind of the interesting thing, right? Is like going through, and as you're building with each iteration, with each new set that would come out, right? We would be looking at, okay, how do we build the Fires deck? How do we make it so that, like, what do we use to sink our mana into? Because we knew what spells we were going to be casting. We knew what spells were going to be good, but we needed to find out what were those mana sinks. And so the lands, like the castle cycle of lands in Eldraine, are now the mainstays, ways of doing that. Being able to either make a token to block or to scry, all the more important, for those decks, and especially now, since the recent iterations of them have gone up to like 80 cards. So it's like, you need to have that kind of card selection.
Now, previous guests that I've asked the same question to, the consensus seems to be that the ranking is favorite of 2019, Throne of Eldraine, number 2, War of the Spark, number 3, Ravnica Allegiance, and then number 4, the core set. What do you think about that ranking?
Actually, I liked the core set a lot. I liked Core 2020 a lot. Core 2020 had some of my... Core 2020 is very, very close to Eldraine for being like one of my favorite of the year, because the cards in Core 2020 that were huge for me were all these cards I made commander decks out of, right? So Golos was a big one. And the new Omnath was a big one. I played Field of the Dead, and I play Field of the Dead in like any deck I can. Like those are some of the big, and then obviously now Agent of Treachery being what it is, and like those are the big, meaningful cards that were huge in my commander experience. And I tried to play them in standard, I guess, and I played them in standard during their time, and whatnot, but. It was, yes, it's a core set, but they had a lot of really sweet cards in them. I think that was probably very close to my, like for my second favorite.
Oh, that's cool. I think people ranked it the way that I had said because the other ones had such a strong identity, where a core set is often a mishmash, which is not a bad thing at all. I like that there's a bunch of different cards for different players. For beginning players, like, here's the set that you need to get into if you're new, because this reminds you what flying means. But then it also had stuff like Grafdigger's Cage was in there, I guess, and just a lot of good stuff. Veil of Summer was in there, I guess, and
Veil of Summer was in there, and I think the ley lines were in there, or were the ley lines in?
I think so, because they're still played on standard, right? People play them still. I see people do the ley line, the blue ley line.
I was in Core Set 2020. So with the ley lines also being in there, there's a lot of really good cards in that set. And I agree. I think probably the only reason why it doesn't edge out Eldraine is just because Eldraine had an identity. It had a theme that went around it, and it was a really cool theme. And Core Set was just it's just kind of the hodgepodge and mishmash of cards.
Did you get very many in real life cards compared to previous years?
Yes, I have. So I think I don't think I've ever owned more cards than I have had in 2019, and mostly because all of the times that I've ever been able to play paper Magic and whatnot, I was working at a local game store, and so I was able to borrow cards and play with them, whether it be for events or for just Commander or whatever. I was able to, usually borrow cards and then I just sort them back into stock later on. And so I've never
Lightly
really
played, I hope. Lightly played, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I always took like the worst condition, obviously, because we also a lot of the times we did online sales as well too. So I kept the lower, or I pulled the lower rarity stuff to play with, but or the lower condition stuff to play with, yeah. But yeah, so I never owned as many cards as I had this year, and then this year, or not this year, 2019, I ended up. I think I had 4 commander decks at one point, and very few cards shared between them. So yeah, I had Omnath, I had Golos, I had Geared, which was the Naya tokens pre-constructed commander, and then I also had Yannette, which was the Esper odd cost tribal commander, and so I had those 4, and I ultimately ended up consolidating 2 of the decks together into. I consolidated the Omnath deck into the Golos deck because they were effectively doing the same thing. They were effectively both lands decks, and then Golos just kind of became this monstrosity of I'm going to play Omniscience, I'm going to play Mind's Dilation, I'm going to play Warp World, I'm going to play all these ridiculous spells, and people just weren't a fan of when I warp worlded for the 3rd time in the game.
For the 3rd time.
But yeah, I don't think I've ever gotten 3 times, but I think if I ever had the opportunity to cast it a 2nd time, I think the table just kind of scooped it up and said, let's go to the next game.
Well, and that was all before you would be able to like copy it with Lutri or get into it faster with Gigantha, right?
Oh yeah, this was even before. Oh yeah, this was before Ikoria, or even before Theros came out. Even actually, yeah. We basically stopped playing Commander before Theros Beyond Death came out, and we were all sheltered in. So
yeah, one of the things that I am hearing is that on previous podcasts with previous episodes with previous guests is that they are playing also more, or they were playing more paper. So I think the alarmists that were saying, well, here's the death of paper Magic because it's digital and better and flashier, I don't think that's here yet. But I think I saw that for myself as well, too, even though, like I said, I only went to one pre-release in 2019. I did try to collect a complete set of each standard set that came out little by little. And so one of the things that I like to do is, okay, I play with these cards on Arena, and maybe I play with a deck often or jump around or whatever, but there's so many cards that you don't play with. But one thing that I like to do is flip through my notebook and say, oh, I remember this card. I remember when I cracked this card and people thought it might have been something and it became nothing. Or this one that no one thought was going to be good, and then some time passed and the meta said, no, actually it is good. So I kind of like flipping through my notebooks to see these are the cards. These are the real cards that are one of the important sides of Magic, not just the digital side of it, but the real paper side, which links up with the gathering of it all. And I thought that was just a testament to Magic's endurance.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I mean, people are always going to want to play with paper, right? Magic is a social game. It's something that we're never going to get away from it, and in one way or another. I mean, truth be told, people will always love to play even older formats, right? People will love to play Modern. People will love to play Legacy and Vintage and whatnot, right? And that's not never coming to Arena, like at least not in any near time future, any foreseeable future. Those formats are just not happening on Arena. There's just too many cards to program, and that's not the the 5-year business model or what have you, or the development roadmap plan for them right now. So like, there has to be paper events still too. I mean, not everybody's going to be happy if they move to Magic Online as the only option to play Modern or the only option to play Legacy or Vintage, which unfortunately is kind of already happening there. But it's something that there has to be paper still. It's not going to go away for at least, if at all, like, 10 years at least, right?
Yeah. I think so. And as they continue to explore new spaces or go back to familiar spaces, there's always a well to tap into or a new well to tap into. So one that did both was we got back to Theros. This was the first return to Theros. So now we need to talk about original Theros versus Theros Beyond Death. We need to make that distinction where we were always making the distinction original Ravnica, return to Ravnica, and now return to Ravnica. So we've got the return to Theros Beyond Death. So in general, any thoughts on Theros Beyond Death?
I really loved the set a lot. I played the most competitive Magic during. So Theros was kind of like the tail end of a lot of my like massive competitive Magic playing.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of getting to see some of these mechanics come back and see some really iconic cards like Grey Merchant come back and the Ashiok's come back in different iterations and stuff, and seeing kind of the Enchantress style like themes come back too, and all the auras and the enchantment creatures, like that was all really, really cool to see. And it was really cool to also see them tie in the sagas into the set from Dominaria. And just very overall, like this was a really, really cool set and a really well done kind of throwback and continuation of like the story, quote unquote, if you will, of Theros. So yeah, it was really cool. Really, really liked it.
I think a return can be a great chance to look at what worked and do it again or better, or take something that didn't work and possibly make it work. So escape the brand new mechanic to kind of like flashback things, or not flashback. What is it? It's flashback. I was thinking buyback versus flashback, but yeah, flashback. So it was a way to kind of bring things back from the graveyard to use over and over. It had the great style. It had the great kind of like lore of it about things are coming back from the underworld. Elspeth's coming back from the underworld. So that was like a new thing. We had Return to Devotion and Constellation. So a little bit of the old, a little bit of new, and I think I think they did a great job on that too.
Yeah, and I think they struck a really good balance, particularly within the last Theros set. Really, kind of Devotion was kind of the big broken mechanic that kind of took over, right? And Mono Black Devotion, Mono Green Devotion, and Mono Blue Devotion were all really powerful decks back in their day in Standard, and so they've struck a decent balance with it this time. There isn't a broken card like Nykthos in the set that just like cranks Devotion up, and it's actually more about trying to make an absurd amount of Devotion, and just more about kind of tempoing out and keeping a decent, like an average amount of Devotion on the table, and more about as much as you would play or have if you were just playing cards on curve. And then your payoff was Grey Merchant, and it's much less potent now. Still potent, but not much less potent than it was when you had things like Nykthos running around, where you could generate, call it 15 mana on Devotion through Nykthos, and then untap it and do it again in like the mono green shells or in the green red Devotion shells, right? And so yeah, they struck a really nice balance, and it felt overall fairly. The mechanics of the set were for fairly even keel across the board.
It never took off, but I was trying to play Mono Black Devotion this time around in Theros Beyond Death, and I went through a few different shells, and I thought it was fun. I didn't think it was a very tier deck, even though there was 1 month where it did kind of get me kind of far, and then suddenly it stopped. I don't know, I stopped getting good matchups, or my luck ran out, or I don't know what, but for 1 month it kind of worked well, and I thought that was pretty fun with, there's like that, there's a payoff. You're summoning Grey Merchant, which is what, a 2/4 or a 2/5? It's 2/4. So one of the payoffs is, okay, you're summoning a 2/4, but it's going to do all that great damage and gain you life. And then there's also Bolas' Citadel. So that was also, you gain so much life. What are you going to do with that life? Well, start to then top deck so many amazing things until you hit that next land.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and also like you said, like there was an iteration of the deck that it was there for a little bit, and it really took on a style of closer to like mono black sacrifice. Like it started playing things like the cat oven combo, and then it was also playing like Yarok's Fenlurker, and so you had a good and then Ayara and whatnot as well too. Like you had some good devotion type mechanics or cards to play, but I think that the meta around it kind of evolved past that deck a little bit, and the sacrifice decks turned into kind of the more faster paced aggressive style sacrifice decks that had the sacrifice payoffs in other colors that were not just black. So yeah, but it was cool. It's actually cool that mono black is now a pretty good deck, or I expect it to be a pretty good deck in modern or not a modern historic very soon.
Yeah, I think because we've also got, I guess, like Brain Maggot, turn 1 play there.
Brain Maggot. You also have Phyrexian Obliterator in Historic now, too.
Yeah. So a lot...
were you playing back when Phyrexian Obliterator was in Standard?
No, I came back to Magic in 2017.
Yeah. So Phyrexian, do you know what the card is?
Yeah, the 5 mana, 5/5, I guess, and then you deal damage and you have to sacrifice your own permanents.
Right, yeah, so whenever something deals damage to it, that whoever dealt the damage to it sacrifices permanents, right? Yeah. So yeah, but like 4 devotion on a 5/5 in mono black, like that's crazy, and then you curve out like the knight, what's the one mana 1/2 Knight of the Ebon Legion, Yarok's Fenlurker, Ayara, Phyrexian Obliterator, and then Grey Merchant, and like you just blow them up for
everything.
What is that? 4, 6, 9, 11, 12 devotion on turn 5. Like just that's crazy.
That's living the dream.
Yeah, that's living the dream right there.
And that's the kind of deck that I like. You know, I like, overall, I like blue-black, black-white, or mono-black. You know, the common denominator is black. I like that kind of color. It's philosophy, it's weird cards, it's unfair cards and such. I think I've started to run into a few more people doing Obliterator, definitely. So you got to exile that thing or else you're going to be suffering.
Yeah, it's interesting enough, too. Also, people have been playing it in green-black. Green-black Obliterator, and so I think that they play there's a spell that was in Ikoria that was called Back for More. That you reanimate it from the graveyard, and then you make it fight something, and then you make your opponent sacrifice permanents.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so that's kind of cool. But yeah, like having like that mono black. I played mono black and blue black like zombies back in when they were in Standard in oh goodness, when was this? 2011 maybe, when it was Avacyn restored, or like Avacyn and original Innistrad block, and or Innistrad, and then Scars block, Scars and Avacyn, those two blocks had a really cool like mono black zombies deck that played Obliterator, and then we also had like Liliana of the Veil and some other really cool we had zombie lords and stuff in there too. So yeah, it was like having Obliterator come back was super cool for me.
What do you think about having one of the Ulamogs come back in Historic?
Oh, love it. I love it. I was waiting for some big dumb payoff creature to show up in the format. Like everything has felt so tame as far as Historic is concerned, and now that with this new Historic Anthology coming out, like the doors have been blown wide open. And so yeah, I love it. I love it. Everything about it.
So when they started to reveal Historic Anthology 3, they led with those, Phyrexian Obliterator and Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, right? They led with those. So then everyone's like, wow, if they're talking about those, what else is going to be in this? And I thought for a moment, what if they put the other 2 Eldrazi just so that everyone can have their own Eldrazi friend in there? But I guess one's enough, because, summon it, exile 2 things, and then attack, and then 20 things exiled more. GG.
Yeah.
I've been trying to play with just like a really weird fast ramp. I'm not using Luca. I should probably use Luca, but I've been trying to do a like totally get an Ulamog out as fast as possible with just a ton of mana artifacts, and I'm doing it I'm doing it so inefficiently. It's just a lot of land, a lot of mana artifacts to get into there, and of course I should really be putting Llanowar elves and Luca and Ugins
so like
in
there's
there.
there's a at least it'll probably change, but there's a red green Obosh list that's playing. You play 1-drops and 3-drops, and then Luca, and you don't play any other creatures all the way up until you find Ulamog.
Yeah.
And your goal is to just go like Llanowar elf turn 1. And then like Gruul Spellbreaker or something on turn 3 or on turn 2, and then you find a way you get some damage in, stick a Luca, and flip that the Gruul Spellbreaker into an Ulamog. And I expect that actually that since Luca did not get banned in Historic, there's going to be probably some iteration of that deck that has like a haste enabler in it, so something like Rhythm of the Wild in there, to allow the Ulamog to get maximum value. I expected it was a pretty good deck before.
Crashing Drawbridge, that's what'll do it. That's the artifact that you tap to give haste.
There you go.
Well, there's a lot to choose from, a lot of strategies. I like that they're filling things out with these historic anthologies, and they're going to do remix sets, bring back some of the Amonkhet stuff and Kalaja stuff. So, lots of stuff to look forward to. And can you believe it that we're in this point in the year? At the one hand, we're recording right now, June 2nd. This is obviously releasing this Friday, June 5th, but we're barely in the 6th month of the year. And on the one hand, that's the halfway point of 2020. But on the other hand, it still feels like 2020, at least for me, just started, obviously, because we've got the stay-at-home quarantine, all of that. But I just feel like, wow, we're about to get into previews. Or actually, by the time this releases, I think we're seeing the very first preview, of course, at 2021. So on the one hand, it's going fast, and on the other hand, it's going slow. What do you think about that? Like the pace of things in Magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm okay with the pacing of it so far. I think that so nothing gets me less excited than a stale format. So I mean, I guess having now Historic around and available to play as well when Standard kind of gets boring is nice to have, or I guess maybe the other way around, I'm going to have Standard to play when Historic kind of gets boring. It's nice to have, right? It's good to be able to have a diversity in formats. So having sets come out and previews, it just gives me personally a lot of excitement in figuring out, okay, what's the next cool thing that we can be doing, what's going to be broken, what's going to be great. And me planning my decks early and trying to feel out feeling out what's going to be like potentially really good. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. I just found out today that Core 2021 spoilers are going to be happening or what had happened yesterday.
Yes.
But the Ikoria just came out, and Ikoria has been just a whirlwind of of emotions as far as the set's concerned.
Well, let's segue into that. Let's talk some Ikoria. What are general thoughts on the newest set, Ikoria, Lair, Behemoths?
So, I also, man, they did so many cool things with this set that I just love. It's gonna sound like I'm not gonna like anything, or I'm gonna love everything, and there's nothing that I won't like about things. But I really love this set. They did such a good job with, especially and I know that some people may not like it, but I'm not a big Godzilla fanboy or anything like that. But I loved the Godzilla art cards. I thought they were super super cool, and even more is that kind of piggybacking off of the cool things they did in Eldraine. The comic book arts for the cards in Ikoria are some of the most beautiful pieces of Magic cards I've ever seen, ever. The art is incredible on these comic book cards, and so they nailed a ton with this set, and I have nothing bad to say. Everything is great. Everything is great in this set.
Well, don't be ashamed of that at all. You've come to the right place. This is a place where I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm the cheerleader for it all. I'm a sellout on the shill. Don't worry about it. I want to hear all the good stuff about it as well.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this new set a lot too. Even though, okay, if you're like a really enfranchised player and you're like playing at the top levels of things, there's problems, companions, whatever. Okay, let's put all that aside. I'm such a Tammy player. Sometimes it's like just give me that fun stuff, fun monsters, cool art. New card treatments. Okay, yeah, my wallet's hurting, but it's all like really cool and fun, and that's why we're in it. I think not just for like winning, but also for the fun of it. And I love that comic book art, and I totally I'm on board.
Yeah, I will say like I was less of a hater of the companion mechanic than a lot of other people were. I thought that it was fine. It was okay. Clearly now it's obviously it's been nerfed into the ground. A lot of the times, the ones that were problematic have been nerfed into the ground. So clearly was an issue. But it's something where they're not going to hit 100% of the time on some of these things. I mean, a lot of the times with like testing mechanics and whatnot, like that's something that comes with. You need like games have a beta test period for a reason, is to test mechanics and things like that. But Magic doesn't really have that because they have physical medium that they need to print.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be kind of interesting to actually have like closed beta tests, like not like the streamer preview stuff, but more like closed beta testing, like during the R&D phases for cards and stuff, to really flush mechanics out and get people outside of like R&D to really like look into like the mechanics of the sets, because a lot of the times R&D is super focused on making the set work, and sometimes they don't think about, or they miss key interactions from sets past or what have you, right? So like having people to potentially come into quote unquote beta test a set, I think would be a really cool idea, and you could potentially see a really solid mechanically sound set come out of that kind of experience. But from like a flavor perspective, from an art perspective, just like from some of the cards that were in here, like we got the full ultimatum cycle. We've completed the ultimatum cycle basically now. Like the Mythos cards, all of the Seb McKinnon arts on the Mythos cards were so cool. Like there's just so many cool things in this set, and with the return of cycling and the new mechanics of mutate and whatnot, like there's so many good things about the set that I personally feel it outweighs kind of the negative impacts of the set.
I completely agree on all of those points. I liked playing with the cards. I like the mutate of it. I like that there's these 10 legendary companion creatures. Do you ever do the surveys that they put out on the Magic website when those come out?
Yeah, I do them from time to time. There were a lot of the times when I see them, though, I see them on my phone, and then like I'm doing something else. Like I try to do it while I remember to do it, but so like I've missed a couple of them, but I do them from time to time. Yeah.
I ask that because there was one recently last week or so about Ikoria, and one of the questions in there that I often notice that they ask is on each of these phrases, please rate it from not agree at all to completely agree. And one of them is often in line like, I play Magic because I like to pretend I'm someone else, or I like Magic because I like to express my deck building. These sorts of questions that are really about like the, living Magic, not just playing Magic, but living Magic. So I think if they ask us those questions and they don't really share the data, unfortunately, but if people answer that and they get the responses about like, yes, I do like to pretend, like, look at my companion, it's right over here waiting to pounce at the right time. I think that's part of the reason they do some of these interesting outside of the box things that sometimes then alter the power level, but it's a pendulum, and sometimes we're swinging a little bit towards too much power and brokenness, and sometimes we're swinging to the other side, and just wait, because there's always going to be those 2 points and somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think that I'm very curious to see what Core Set 2021 brings, just because it's something we saw kind of the power level of a lot of the cards and the impact of a lot of the cards that Core 2020 had. Clearly with Agent of Treachery and whatnot, and Golos, and Field of the Dead and Veil of Summer, all being like hot topic cards. That's interesting enough thinking about. That's 3 cards out of Core Set 2020 that have been banned in Standard. Curious to see what Core 2021 has to bring, as far as like what kinds of cards they're going to be printing there, because they don't. The cool thing that's nice about the Core Set is that they're not beholden to any sort of theme or any sort of aesthetic. They can just kind of print the cards that they feel would be good to have in the set, like in a set. They can kind of open up their design space a little bit and figure out kind of what's cool, because they don't have to worry about a theme or it lining up with the rest of the set, right? They could just kind of go with it. So
they could try to hit a little bit of everything in terms of
right.
stuff for Standard, stuff for Modern, Pioneer, Commander,
right.
new players, and entrenched players, and so forth. So it is kind of a playground in that sort of sense. And as we saw with 2020, there were some toys that were a little too strong, but we'll see where we go with 2021. I just need to get used to calling it 2021. I just want to say 2020 all the time, but no, that was the last one.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious what your thoughts on this were on this band, because we just had the BNR announcement for Standard and the change to the. I know we've hinted at it throughout the podcast. We've kind of mentioned it throughout the podcast, but we may not, we haven't specifically said what had happened. But the Core 20 or the cards getting banned in Standard and Historic, so Agent of Treachery and Fires of Invention being banned, and then as well as the mechanical change for the companions, where now instead of being able to just cast them from exile whenever you'd like, you have to pay 3 mana at sorcery speed to add it to your hand, and then you can cast it. What are your thoughts on those changes and the bans?
Well, I think it does definitely depower a lot of the companions. I'm not like I want to progress on the ladder, but it's not like my main thing. I want to just play fun, weird stuff, and I'm not like a person that wants to get in like a big tournaments and such. So I think that's a little annoying that there's like an extra cost, and you've got if you're trying to play the companion on curve, well, you just lost a turn possibly because you had to pay just to get it to your hand, and then it could be removed from your hand, it could be countered and all of that. So I understand why they did it, that perhaps some of the higher level players were saying it was problematic. I don't think it's going to affect me too much in what I like to play though, but I guess they had to do what they had to do. What about yourself?
So I was going to say, since the bans really kind of didn't really affect you too much either, probably, huh?
Yeah, for me, because again, I'm not playing like, okay, Agent of Treachery. It's annoying when you get your stuff stolen, especially a land, and you can see some shenanigans where you kind of blink it with Thassa and do it again in the same turn, and that's really a feel bad. But it's like, wow, they had to ban a 7 mana card that when the other pieces of it made it that bad, but when else would you have to worry that much about what it would do? And I guess because of the play pattern that it would steal all your good stuff, that was feel bad enough. And then Winota, okay, that was interesting. Like, okay, attack with a non-human, and then you get to go get humans off the top of your deck. Like I think that's very interesting. But I guess people, when you've got like the whole internet hive mind trying to figure out every possible interaction, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, you can do actually weird stuff. Like, yeah.
Personally, I think that the companion change, to kind of get that out of the way, is fine. I think it's okay. It's going to favor control a lot more, because a lot of times control, their use of a companion, or in this case particularly Yorion, they're less beholden to needing Yorion anyways, and so they either are just going to stop playing Yorion altogether and just go back to 60 card control, or they're just going to wait until the late game where it doesn't really matter so much anymore, that they can pay 3 mana to put Yorion in their hand, keep mana up to do whatever other shenanigans or counter magic or whatever the removal they need to do, and then play Yorion when it's convenient, right?
Yeah.
The aggro decks, like you were saying, you lose out on tempo, you lose out on a whole turn of just trying to put this thing in the companion in your hand to be able to use it. And a lot of strategies were built around the ability to be able to have this companion effectively played on curve and being able to have a powerful curve leading up to your companion. And so some of these more aggressive focus decks, like these Luris sacrifice decks, or the mono white all that glitters Luris decks are going to be a problem, are going to be pretty much gone, I would expect. Or like maybe the Omori decks are not nearly as powerful anymore because you're wanting to cast creatures every turn, stuff like that, right? We may see some of the other companions who are not nearly as played as much come to the forefront now and start to see some play. But I think it's overall just a fine change. I think it needed to happen. It definitely, kind of seeing kind of the state of it. Now for the bans, on the other hand, I have a lot to say about the bans. I think as far as standard is concerned, for those bans, I think that I feel like it was not the right call to ban Agent of Treachery and not to ban Agent of Treachery. Fires I can get behind as much as I loved Fire's invention. It was definitely, with the cards in Ikoria and with things like Yorion and stuff, definitely not a card that should exist in this format. But Agent of Treachery, I think, definitely did not need to be banned, and only because for a couple of reasons. It has 6 months to go before it rotates out of standard. So it's on its way out. And generally, I think the cards that should have been banned were Luca and Winota. Because my philosophy is that those cards are cards that limit R&D design space. And if you think about it, right, like, what's the next payoff creature that is going to come out that we're going to be able to use Luca or Winota to abuse? So, like, if it's not Agent of Treachery, what's the next card, right? So basically Wizards effectively can't print anything that has a powerful ETB that's high costed and such. It's because you're just going to cheat it into play with Luca. The big problem with Agent of Treachery is that you're able to cheat it into play on turn 4 or turn 5 with a great amount of consistency, and then steal somebody's lands. And I'm not saying that Agent wasn't a problem, but I think that the better option is to ban the enablers and not to ban the payoff. So I think that is something that probably was missed the mark a bit. But I guess, you have to, these are new cards. I mean, I guess no cards are immune to getting banned. Oko got banned pretty quickly, or fairly quickly. I think it took a little bit for him to get banned, but he was from the current set, the recent set when he got banned. I think that we will potentially see, with Zendikar Rising and Core 2021 coming out, potentially Luca and Winota or Winota getting banned, because there's going to be whatever this next new big and top end creature is going to be, we're going to find a way to incorporate it into a Luca or Winota deck and cheat it into play, and then it's going to be a problem. So I think that's one thing for the standard. But for historic, the format that I've actually been more excited to play, I absolutely think that yes, Agent of Treachery needed to go in that format 100%. Fires probably needed to go in that format as well too, but I think they also missed Winota as well. Luca I'm less concerned about in that format, but Winota, the Winota decks barely got touched in historic. Their main target to cheat into play is Ingrass Ingrass Marauders, which is a 7-mana 4/4 that says creatures, whenever a creature you control would, like, it deals double damage, right? It's Obosh, but for all your creatures. So you would, you'd go turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Goblin War Boss, right? And then on turn 3 you'd go Winota, attack with 3 things, and get, a Haktos and 2 Ingrass Marauders in play and kill your opponent on turn 3. Like, that's the big problem. I think that's the deck that may rise to the very top of the format, and Luca or Winota would have to be banned. I think that they should have banned it in this BNR, and I think they missed the mark pretty heavily on that one.
But I believe they did ban Winota in Brawl.
They did ban it in Brawl. That's true. There was some for those exact same reasons.
Yes.
For those exact same reasons, they banned it in Brawl because you were able to go and basically cheat into play a very aggressive deck very, very quickly,
Yes.
and kill your opponent very, very fast. And in Historic Brawl, and Friendly Brawl, you could get the Ingress Marauders and whatnot. And so there was 2 iterations of the Winota deck in Historic. One was playing Agent of Treachery, a singular Agent of Treachery, and one was playing is not. But both lists are playing 4 Ingress Marauders, right? So I think that they missed the mark on Winota. They're going to eventually see in the next couple of months that was a miss on their part. They will probably end up banning it, very, very quickly. When whatever the next Historic, I think there's like an invitational, a Mythic Invitational or something like that that's for Historic. They'll probably see a lot of Winota decks, and it's going to be kind of a problem. So, but I say this because I laddered actually this season. I laddered to Mythic in Historic. I went from Platinum 4 when Historic Anthology 3 came out, and laddered all the way to Mythic with so I laddered from Platinum to Diamond with Tempered Steel, with an aggressive Tempered Steel deck, but I only needed to win like 4 or 5 games. And then from there on, throughout Diamond into Mythic, I laddered with Sultai Yarok, Sultai Field of the Dead. And that did a really, really good job. And then as soon as I got into Mythic, I was like, okay, I need to switch over to this Winota deck because it's actually just the best deck. It's just the most insane deck in the format. So yeah, I've been playing a ton of Historic, so I feel like they've really missed a big opportunity to make that format just a little bit more bearable, a little bit better by banning Winota. They just didn't get around to that one.
It seems like when you subvert the basic tenets of Magic, that's when you get into a lot of trouble. So ramp and cheating things into play, sneak attacking things into play, and so forth.
Right.
It seems like that's what causes lots of issues because people joke about like, yeah, Magic as Richard Garfield intended, but if you still even go back to Alpha, like, okay, you can have a turn 1 Mox and Black Lotus and do all that amazing stuff, even on turn 1. So what is like as Magic was intended? What even is that? But the tenets of it in basic theory is you play 1 land per turn, you slowly build up resources to a big payoff. So if you say that that's basic Magic, okay, then yes, when you start to subvert and do Fires of Invention stuff, Wilderness Reclamation stuff, Lucas stuff, Winota stuff, okay, then you're really subverting the basics of the game.
Yeah, and like the problem, I think the biggest thing with Winota, I think, is that she's too powerful, and that her ability does not even rely on her doing anything. Her ability just relies on her not being removed from the board on that turn, and it just kind of you just attack with some other creatures and get value. Like things, for example, like that are similar are something like Perforos, right? The new Perforos from Theros Beyond Death is basically kind of a sneak attack, but he has some limitations and he has an activated ability and he costs 5. Like there's a lot of ways that the cards, quote unquote, bad pun, are stacked against Theros or against Perforos for being a creature or a card that would see a ton of play because there's just so many costs associated with him. But for Winota, it's just like so quick, so easy to abuse her ability, and then the payoffs are just ridiculously good. So it's there's like you were saying, you're kind of subverting a lot of the mechanics of the game, and in a way where it's too easy to do so. It's not even just doing it; it's doing it in a easy and consistent way.
What do you think about the opposite track in terms of Wizards printing things that are kind of like answers? Like, okay, Tail's End is one of my favorite counter spells because it targets an activated ability, and there's so many amazing activated abilities to counter, such like even cracking your Fabled Passage. I love Tail's Ending a Fabled Passage to someone. And then there's Repudiate, so that's the double blue or double green that is like a Tail's End, half of a card. So what about that? Like maybe some sort of like more taxing effects. Okay, let's say in white there's the pay 2 to have your creatures attack sort of effect, prison realm sort of thing, prison, whatever it's called. But what do you Ghostly prison, yeah. So what do you think about these sorts of, okay, instead of banning things, what about printing more answers to the possibilities that you have, because then that you get into rock paper scissors type of Magic for good or for bad.
Yeah, so I think printing answers is really, really difficult because printing answers you still have to achieve you have to achieve an ever-growing balance, right? You have to balance the cards out. You can't make an answer to a deck so good that it takes over too much, right? Like as an example, like I don't think Oko was the answer to anything particular, but like just as an example, like if Oko was printed as the answer to the plague of standard, whatever it was at the time, like then Oko, that's the kind of balance you don't want. You don't want the card to be way too good so that it just answers too many things, right? There's this balance. If you just ban the cards outright from the set or from the format, then it's up to the player base and the player community to figure out what's the new meta and what's the new balance. But you're not having to introduce a whole different, you're not having to figure out a whole new set of balances. And a lot of times with some of these inclusions, the answers are sometimes like fairly weak. Actually, I know a perfectly good example. Veil of Summer, I think. Veil of Summer was an answer to what was I forget the deck that was really, really prevalent, but Veil of Summer, when it was printed, it was effectively heralded as an answer to a particular deck in the standard format, and then it was so good that it got banned. It basically shut out all of the blue decks or the black decks in the format, and then it got banned because it was too good. Like striving to achieve the balance where you can have an answer that yes answers the thing you're intending it to, but not be so good that it shuts out so many other things is the hard part. So it's if they can achieve it, sure, that I'm all for it. But it's a hard thing to achieve.
I agree. I think when Wizards hears this episode of the podcast, they're going to have a lot of great things to think about.
Man, if they hear this episode of the podcast, I'm sorry, but I have to. I loved all your other standard stuff.
Well, they've got to balance waste so much. They've got to look far in the future. They've got to look a little bit in the past. They've got to look at now. They've got to look at limited. They've got to look at constructed. And yeah, it's just a lot to do. I don't. Yeah. On the one hand, it'd be great to work at Wizards and to be behind the scenes of it all. But on the other hand, you've got so many plates to spin and so much to do. I just want to play Magic.
That's true. That's very much true. As much I do love, like, card design and game design and stuff like that, but there's a lot of history that goes into Magic and designing it. Like, I will admit there were some very great minds over at Wizards of the Coast, and in R&D, but even then, with all the great minds that are there are still things that get missed. There, so they're not one small team can take on the world. It's something that there are going to be things that are missed, but all in all, I think they still do a really, really good job with, and they've been doing a very good job with the new sets and the standard sets that have been coming out.
I think so. I think the negativity does perhaps tend to, the voice of negativity tends to rise, but I think in general everything's working well, and there's smart minds in the building, and they're going to keep doing cool things, and there's new sets to keep looking forward to. So I guess as we wind down, any thoughts, predictions, or hopes for, let's look even further than 2021, Zendikar Rising?
I don't remember entirely where the last Zendikar block left off. I don't remember if they actually beat the Eldrazi. I know Emrakul went to
the Moon
Shadows or to Innistrad. So I think that from what it sounds like, Zendikar Rising, it might be kind of the rebuilding of the plane after the Eldrazi. So we might see a lot of really cool elemental support synergies, and potentially allies kind of come back as well too. Some of the non Eldrazi focused stuff. Alternatively, I think there might also be, I think it would be kind of interesting if there was a Phyrexian invasion. I know that there was something in Theros about Phyrexian. There was a card, Elspeth's Nightmare.
Yeah.
It's one of the sagas, right? I think we had talked about it before, where the art had the Phyrexian Obliterator on the art. Yeah. So that's a storyline that's kind of left unresolved. So I'm kind of curious what might happen if that is strictly left to like what's happening on Theros, or if there's something that might even be that maybe that's a premonition of the future and the Phyrexians are actually moving their way towards Zendikar. Who knows? But I think there's I think I'd love to see some really cool like elemental stuff because that's one of my favorite tribes in Magic. So.
Yeah, I was not playing during the original and return to Zendikar, but I like to read a lot about the history of the game and kind of look back on things. And other people that have been on the podcast would, they always tell me about their experiences in those different sets where I was never playing. But it seems that the original Zendikar had a lot of love, and then the Battle for Zendikar a lot less. And then this third one, well, this would be the example again about perhaps righting the wrongs or the things that didn't go right in the last time, and then improving upon the stuff that went well on the first time. Now, however, here's a radical thought: every set now that they're especially as a one and done sort of thing, they definitely seem like they need to have a conflict. We had the stuff happening with the wilds and the civilization in Eldraine. We had the humans and the beasts in Ikoria. We've got in Theros, we had Elspeth coming back, and she's no longer Sun's champion, she's Sun's nemesis. So here's a radical thought: do we need every single set to have some sort of huge, big conflict? And I know that good storytelling is often some kind of conflict, but if every set is self-contained, do we need to cram in a big conflict? I know you're saying, okay, well, we had the Eldrazi previously. As I recall, I believe Chandra torched a couple of them, and then Emrakul ended up in the moon. So I don't think the Eldrazi are totally gone, but for the moment, they're gone. And yes, the Phyrexians, there's still unresolved stuff, and hey, wasn't Karn leaking oil and stuff, and what happened that in Dominaria, and who knows, but I'm just saying, that's a possibility. Do we need to have a conflict at every single time? What about just going back to a plane and having some fun times there and being chill and just having some great cards and see what happens?
Yeah. I think there needs to be some thread of story because, in particular, with a plane where there has been previously established storylines, right? There needs to be still some kind of thread through that or a pickup of this thread. There's a reason that we're going back there. And I would say but I could definitely see maybe the conflict doesn't necessarily come in the set per se, and maybe comes as a setup for the next time we go back to Zendikar potentially, right? There could be some things there, but yeah, I'd be curious. That would be very interesting. I'd be very interested to see how they pull that off if there's a set that there's no conflict in.
If you kind of think about it like this, remember back to Guilds of Ravnica, even though they had gone now to sort of the one and done thing, there was Guilds of Ravnica, Ravnica Allegiance, War of the Spark. You can kind of think of them as one final block of Ravnica, let's say. And on Ravnica, Guilds of Ravnica, that was just leading into okay, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes, leading into Ravnica Allegiance. Okay, there's more of it happening. Nicol Bolas's plan is coming together, and then finally it happens in War of the Spark. So what if Zendikar is let's get back to the Gatewatch. We haven't seen them in Theros. We haven't seen them in Eldraine. Who knows how much we will see in 2021, even though they've said, I guess, Teferi is going to be there. What if Zendikar sort of let's get the gang back together again, check in with each other. Where are we at? R.I.P. Gideon, but let's come together, be stronger to see what the next threat is.
Yeah, so the only... What do we see? We saw... Oh, yeah, we haven't... Yeah, I guess you're right. We haven't seen the Gatewatch in a while. Yeah, I think it would definitely be interesting of bringing that back together. I think there was even some potential conflict within the Gatewatch before well too. So that may even be part of the plot, is that there might be some stuff with the Gatewatch. So yeah, it could be cool to see that.
Well, next time I have you back on the podcast and we're talking about the new set, we can look back on our predictions and see how right we were. Final thoughts on anything at all as we wrap up?
No, I think we're. I'm very excited to see what these next the next couple, the new standard set turns into, or the next new standard format and historic formats turn into, and what Core 2021 has to bring. Very excited for this year of Magic.
Same here. We're halfway through. We've still got plenty more sets and supplemental products and stuff to enjoy. And hopefully when we get back to a little bit more normalcy, we'll start to play a little bit more Magic in person. Yeah. But in the meantime, we've still got digital Magic and digital means.
Yep.
Well, Alan, can you tell people one more time, self-promote, where can we find you online?
Yeah, sure. It's twitch.tv/Dragosi MTG. Twitter is at esportsalan, and then check out Rebel Esports. Their Twitter is rebel_GN.
Thank you so much. As for myself, I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube, Twitch, all that good stuff. Just search for VM Campos. I stream on Saturdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. I have a Patreon. People can check out the Patreon and follow for free, just to be alerted to everything that I do. Or if they go to the $1 tier, they'll unlock exclusive stuff. And at the $2 tier, I will mail people vintage Magic cards in appreciation. But no, not a Black Lotus. So thanks one more time, Alan, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
This has been VM Campos, and I'll see you in the arena.